is Shakib. I am a second year CS student. I'm an events coordinator at LCS. So I'm just going to quickly get the crowd warmed up. So I want everyone to raise their hand if they're in CS here. Dang, that was a surprise. All right, so I'm going to go on like physics. Anyone from physics? Math? BBA? Oh, we got a math? We got some BBA? Okay. All right, so who here is in first year? Okay, lots of first year people. Are you guys like nervous for co-op? Kinda? No? Okay, so that's your first years. Who's in second year? Okay, third year and above? All right, nice turnout. We got everyone here. All right, I'm just gonna pass it off to Yana, and she's gonna introduce some of our speakers today. Oh,
Okay.
actually, before that.
So first we have to do our sign-in. So everyone grab your phone and just get this QR code, fill in your info. Basically, this is to make sure your attendance goes towards your Laurier experience record, and so we can just track who's at our events and stuff like that. So I'll leave that up for a few minutes. And then a link is also in the Twitch chat, but I doubt any of you are viewing that right now and probably shouldn't. Okay. Not at the moment, but we're trying to get our other events as a speaker series. So we have Meet the Professionals coming up, which I'll talk about in a second, and we're definitely going to talk to Ian and the co-op office about making that a speaker series. Okay, I'll move on here. So other LCS events coming up. I'll also put the QR code up at the end of the event, so if you guys missed it, you can do it then. We have our CP 103/104 review session, like our bi-weekly ones, on November 17th. Then, as I said, Meet the Professionals is on December 1st. This is like LCS's flagship event. It's like gonna be huge. Tons of speakers in the industry, like from software developers, data scientists, cybersecurity, everything. And that'll be in person. And December 1st, yes. And then finally, we have our final exam review session. This will be our last event of the semester for the CP 103 and CP 104 review session, also in person. Definitely recommend coming out to that to make sure you ace the CP 104 final. And now I'll introduce Ian, our speaker. So Ian is the Co-op Fundamentals instructor at Laurier, and he's going to have tons of helpful insights. And I'll just pass him a mic here, and then we're going to go through a bit of a Q&A. So maybe just give a quick intro.
I've never had my voice amplified before. Like, I really don't need it usually, so I'll try to keep the voice down for you guys.
So maybe just give a quick intro about yourself,
Sure.
What you do at Laurier.
So my name's Ian. I work in the co-op department, and my role is to run the fundamentals of co-op course. So all students that come into co-op or PEP programs do a mandatory training program where we teach you how to build resumes and cover letters and prepare you for interviews and all that fun stuff. We also organize a speaker series, so we get students going outside of our sessions to checking out sessions similar to these, some things like the Meeting the Professionals sessions. We definitely love to partner with LCS on events so that you gain insights and industry knowledge to help you in your progress through co-op. So we've been doing the program for about 7 years. We now have a team of people that run the show because we went from about 450 co-op students to about 1,000. The number of computer science students went from about 10 in my first year to about 130 this year between the double degree PEP and single degree CSDS programs. Shout out to data science. Is there any data sciences students? Because I didn't hear that one earlier. A few? Okay, welcome. Good stuff. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me, and nice to see a lot of familiar faces. People I haven't seen literally waving. Yeah, I haven't seen some of you in a while, but good to see a lot of you on the exec helping out with the club. That's awesome.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So first we're going to run through some questions that we have from the LCS team, and then we'll give it up to the audience to ask any questions you guys have for Ian. First, just generally, how does like the BBA co-op program differ from CS and PEP, and like how does the process also differ with those three?
Compared to BBA, not terribly dissimilar. The experience that you would go through is aligned with what you would do as a BBA student. In fact, if you're a double degree BBA and CS student where both of your degrees are here at Laurier, you would experience the course basically the same way as everybody else does. We do a version of the course that is tailored for CS. So when we get to say resumes, it has to get a little bit more deliberate to the CS space than say for business students. But as a double degree, you kind of have a choice of what you would look at. The bigger differences have to do with your order of work terms and academics. Like that's different for the 3 different programs. So if you're a single degree CS/DS student, you would go out for your first work term after your 3A, which is in a spring semester, and your first work term is in a fall. And then you alternate back and forth between work and academics. If you're a double degree CS, you go a little bit earlier. You go out in the spring after your 2B. And then if you're a PEP, you also go out in the spring, but it's after your 3B. So it's like a catch-all. If you did not get into co-op as a CS/DS student, if you were not in double degree, there is a PEP option that you could apply to later on in your program. And the main difference about PEP is that instead of doing 4-month work terms and alternating back and forth to your academics, you do 12 to 16 months straight at the same firm. And it can be a great experience because you go so much deeper into projects and work that you're doing. You don't have to get trained every 4 months about how to do a new role. You just continue on and make a big impact. So that's what I would say are the 3 main differences between those programs.
Great, thank you. And I'm sure a lot of first and second years have this question going through their mind constantly. What are the best ways that maybe first years and second years can prepare? I know first years you have much more time to prepare, so it might differ. But yeah, what's your opinion on that?
So thinking about the timeline for the single degree admissions, you would apply for co-op at the end of first year. And we look at we do admission interviews basically soon. So are there people here who have already applied to be in co-op and you've got an admission interview coming up? Yeah, some hands. Okay, so for most students doing single degree, that's the order. You would go through your first year, you get your 5 credits, you progress and stay in your program, meet your minimum GPA requirements, all that fun stuff. And then you tell us that you want to apply for co-op and you go through a competitive admission process. So what's important to know about the competitive process for single degrees is that we look at 4 things when we're interviewing all the candidates because there's a limited amount of spots. We don't admit everybody, okay? So we look at your grades, we look at your extracurricular involvement, we look at your work experience, and then we look at the quality of the interview that you have with us. And those 4 items are weighted equally. So what you should be thinking as a first year between now and if you wanted to get into co-op when you apply is where do I maybe have some gaps? If I don't have a lot of work experience, maybe this is a good winter semester, spring coming up to go find some work and work full time and try to find something where you're making an impact. Doesn't have to be in CS, like we will look at all sorts of different roles, but we're looking for what were you doing in a leadership aspect, what kinds of responsibilities did you have? Extracurricular, same thing. So it's not necessarily a quantity thing, it can also be a quality. So are you getting involved with groups like LCS? Are you getting involved in the community? And what is your impact there? And we'll talk to you in your admission interview about what you're getting up to. And then we take the top 35 students based on how those interviews go. So that's how the single degree CS/DS students, if you're a double degree BBA in CS, it is automatic entry. You opt in. So we will send you an email at the beginning of second year saying, congratulations, you've progressed into second year double degree, you're eligible for co-op. Please accept your admission conditions by this date if you want to be a part of it, or don't, and then you don't have to. For PEP, the exact same idea as the single degrees. You would apply at the end. Sorry, I might be getting a little bit of reverb here. You'll get, at the end of your second year, same idea. You would apply through navigator.wlu.ca, say you want to be in the PEP program. There is not competitive admissions for PEP. If you meet the minimum criteria of grades, you are in your computer science program, you would be eligible for PEP, and we would move in from there. The size of the PEP program changes a lot from year to year. Last year, I think we had 25 students do the 16-month work terms. This semester, we're preparing 45 students. So the number of students in PEP will fluctuate depending on interest and depending on how many students want to take advantage of a 12 to 16-month opportunity. So hopefully that helps to explain some of the process of how to get into co-op.
Yeah, definitely. Also, if you're in like the BBA CS double degree, make sure you opt in. I have a friend who forgot to opt in and he's been kicking himself for like a year. So thank you. I know one really confusing thing for me when I was in first year is the whole rank match process, because I was like, people are going to be ranking me? What? People are going to see my rankings. So maybe could you explain like how rank match works, and also how does continuous round work, and then how do interviews kind of play through this timeline?
Yeah, so there's different ways of securing work while you're in co-op. Most students will go, especially for their first, maybe second work terms, through our Navigator portal and apply to jobs that are pre-approved and that we're promoting on behalf of those companies, because we know that they would count as co-op work terms. The other way to do it is you could find your own job, and there's an approval process where you bring us the job description, we make sure that it fits all the co-op criteria, and then we can approve that for you, and you would use that job as your work term. Now, going back to the idea of primary and continuous round and rank match, there is a process whenever you're going through recruitment, if you were looking for a job and you didn't have one secured yet, where we will post a lot of jobs at once. And it's normally at the very beginning of the semester before you go on work term. So for the upcoming work term, people are looking for work for the spring. The next primary round is in early January. So right at the start of the semester. We drop a lot of jobs at once. You're allowed to apply to as many of them as you want, but we don't book interviews until the end of the applications. Once the applications are collected, we send them to all the employers. They decide on who they want to interview, and then you go to all of your interviews. And instead of there being direct job offers sent to students, we do what's called ranking and matching. And what it means is the employers will rank you based on how high in priority do they want to hire you. A number one, meaning you're a direct offer, like they want to hire you, they're giving you a number one. You then get the rankings, you rank them back. So if you got a number one from a company, you would just give a one back and you could accept that job. Or if you don't have any number ones, you would rank back the companies accordingly, and you would get matched with the most suitable match based on the sum of those rankings. So we do that once. It's a very common process in co-op that you will see that at other institutions. In fact, UW does it twice consecutively every recruitment period, because they have that volume of students, they have that volume of jobs. Whenever you have a ton of jobs posted at once, it's just tough if it's a straight, you apply for a job, they give you an offer, you have a window to accept, because you're gonna have a lot going on at once. You might have 4 or 5 interviews. You get an offer in the very first interview, it's gonna be a tough decision. You might not get to see future interviews. So that's why rank match exists. It's pretty common at other institutions. We like to do one, because once one is done, good. Like, go apply to jobs, do your interviews. It gives both employers and students a little bit more room to just say yes to offers right away. But when you hear primary round or rank match, that's essentially what that means. And there's actually an entire module in the fundamentals course when you get into co-op or PEP. And we'll explain how all of that works and do an entire workshop on it.
Great, thank you. And then one of our final questions is, I know co-op can be really stressful for some students, and it's like even like the first process of getting in and then the process of finding a job. So what advice do you have for people with that anxiety or stress, and like advice for students who maybe don't get into the co-op program?
Well, certainly in CS, you've got an advantage because you've got 2 shots at it. If you don't get into the CS competitive program, you could look at PEP as an alternative for later on, so there's always that. What I would say is that co-op is an opportunity. Like, we'll work with you really hard to get your application packages up to a really strong level, making a really good impact when you're applying to jobs. I always look at this metric, which is what is the percentage of time you get an interview per apps that you submit. I'd like to get that number as solid as we can so that when you're applying for a job, you're more likely to get an interview. Can you do that process on your own? Absolutely. Like, you can find internships, you can find roles. There's lots of work in the tech sector that you can find. But one of the advantages of being in co-op is you will have a coordinator who will be responsible for you and will work with you on helping you to find employment, help to answer your questions, do one-on-ones, little strategic sessions on how to make your documents better. If you don't get into co-op, I know that sounds like a nice thing to have at your disposal, but the Career Development Center is also great, and they have people who can work with students who aren't in co-op, work with you on your resume and cover letter. They have lots of opportunities on their job boards that are also not, they might be both co-op and non-co-op approvable, so you'll see opportunities. So certainly you shouldn't think like if you don't get into co-op or PEP, it means anything negative about your future. It doesn't at all. You just need to make sure, and the co-op side, like, we're working towards internships, we're working hard. You just need to make sure if you're not in co-op and you want those internships, it is a lot of work. Like we tell students, it feels like another course to do all this work. You're gonna do a lot of applying. Like you're gonna apply to a lot of jobs, you're gonna get a lot of rejections. Like that's normal. And I think sometimes not being in co-op and not experiencing that for the first time, if you don't get that messaging, it can be hard. It's like, maybe I'm not cut out for this, or maybe I don't have what it takes. That's usually not what it is. It's just, it's numbers. You gotta get your apps in. You gotta make a good effort to get your name in front of a lot of people to secure work. So, hope that's my pitch. I certainly will not stand in front of people and say, oh, you have to get into co-op. No, like there's pros and cons to it. There's rules, like to being in co-op. There's things that might not even work out in your favor, right? So you need to know your admission conditions, like know what you're getting into, know that there's fees, like you have to pay to be in co-op, right? So yeah, it's not for everybody, but it is an opportunity. And if those are some of the things that you want to get out of your academic experience at Laurier, like we can help you with the internship side.
Yeah, thank you. I 100% agree. Those are all the questions from us. So maybe if you wanted to field some questions from the audience.
I noticed when I was booking my interview, that the interview is actually only 15 minutes long.
Yep.
So what is kind of the structure of that interview, and what would you suggest emphasizing during that time?
Sure. So it is a balance of getting the information conveyed to us in that time crunch, right? But remember the 4 things that we're going to look at, right? Your grades. You're probably not going to talk about your grades, like we've got your transcript. We're going to talk about your work experience. We're going to talk about your extracurriculars. And then we're going to ask you a couple more questions that'll help impact your quality of interview. So make sure that you're ready to talk about your experiences. What kinds of things do you think we would want to know about? What were the value adds that you brought? How does that prepare you for co-op roles? Like those are all great things to talk about. You're welcome. Any other questions? I don't know the percentage specifically, but this year we have about 35 spots for the CSDS single degree students, and I think we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 90 apps. That's very high. That's higher than we normally see it, so that's great to see demands going up. I would say normally it's about half. This year for the single degrees, it's a little bit less than half, just because of how many people applied. PEP, it's 100%. PEP, it's everybody. Yep.
What's the number one mistake you see like students come to the co-op interview?
That is a tricky one because I'm trying to figure out what exactly would my boss say is like I should talk about this or not. I think it is knowing that you do have a 15-minute window of time to express sometimes quite a lot of information in that short period. So I would always recommend to students that you should never go into some of you who have been through my interview skill sessions too, you really shouldn't go into an interview ready to, like going in to tell a story that you've never said out loud before. Like if you're trying to think about the details of an experience from your past, but you've never said it to someone, even if it's just your phone, you're creating it on the spot, and you've never really articulated what an experience was to somebody else, it's hard. It's actually harder to like condense your message and say what you need to say in a short period of time. So I would say preparation. Oh yeah, for the stream, the question was about what's the common mistake people make in admission interviews. And my comment was try to prepare, like think about what your answer is ahead of time. Coming up with it on the spot can be challenging. Yep. After primary round or after like all recruitment right before the work term, it's very, very high. For the single degree CSDS students, the first work term, it was more challenging because we was in the like very beginning of the pandemic. They were looking for work in September 2020. That was tough. Even then, I think we were over 85%. The last 2 CSDS cohorts were 100%. Everybody got a job. For PEP, it's a little bit less. PEP, I would say it's somewhere between 80 to 90% depending on the year. And then double degree CS is very, very strong. I don't know exactly what the number is for them, but I don't recall in the last 3 years a double degree CS student that didn't find work. What percentage of jobs in co-op that you can apply for are actually CS related? I think there's I think there's some expectation management we have to have here about if you're thinking like the job board is just going to be full of FANG company developer roles and that in your first work term you're ready for that. Let's just no. But there are like a lot of big bank roles. A lot of the roles at some of the FANG companies, like if you want to get into Google, can be challenging because A, they have their favorites of where they want to hire for, and we're always knocking on the door and trying to get their postings. But some of them also post outside of our primary round window, so it's important that you're doing your personal job search, looking at their websites, applying when it makes sense to. Some of those internships, they hire 8-9 months ahead of time. Like we've seen students get hired at like Boston Consulting Group in tech roles, and they were securing that role before their next co-op term even started for their next role. Okay, so to answer the question about, like timing, by the end it's good, but by the end of primary round, it ranges. It's usually between 40 to 55%. There's also a lot of stigma about I'm not hired by the end of primary round. That means something about me. It doesn't. It's usually a numbers game. You either applied to a lot and that's good, you got a job, or you didn't apply to a lot, you're choosy. It's not that there's a bad route, but it doesn't mean anything about you. Yep.
Related to that question as well, for like a student, if you don't end up getting like a job for your first co-op term,
Mhm.
does that affect like could you go back and like just take like your academics for that semester?
Yeah, this is getting kind of deep. Like we would look at these on a one-off situation with students. Like if you were meeting, we set application targets. Like we want to make sure that students are active and applying to jobs. We're not just putting jobs up and no one's applying to them. Like that's not good from the employer side. But if you were meeting application targets, you were working with us, you were improving your packages, and it just did not work out and you didn't find a job, we would work with you at that time. Like, okay, we're at the deadline, like we're beyond the date of you can start a work term at this stage. We would look at how you'd been performing and how active you'd been, and we would look at making some accommodation for you about what we would do moving forward. But it's such a small group that it's really a one-on-one situation. Depends on the circumstance. Yeah. These are really good questions. So just keep me on my toes. I don't know what to expect. Yeah, go for it. You have to be in your program, so you need to have at least a 7 overall in your CS major. I think there might even be a concession that can be lower overall as long as your CS portion is high enough, but at least 7. But aim for as high as you can, obviously. Like when you apply to jobs, it might be worth knowing that your transcript is visible, so employers will see your grades, right? So every semester you want to try to do your best, make a good impression, but staying in your program, that's the minimum. And one more question?
Yeah, one more is good.
Okay.
If you receive an offer from outside the country,
Yeah.
will the co-op department allow it?
Yeah, that's part of the personal job search parameters. So you would bring us the role. We would look at what's involved in it. There's things that in order for it to be co-op or PEP, it has to be like full-time hours, it has to be full-time pay, it has to be relevant to your program. So we would need to look at the offer and then we would basically approve it on a case-by-case basis. But yes, we don't see a lot of international right now because pandemic, but it happens. Remember the first cohort, I think it was like Vincent's and a few other people, the joke every week was Cali or bust. Everyone wanted to go to California. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And people applied, and it's just tough to get some of those jobs posted because for them to post at a school like ours, we might have 60 students looking for CS-related roles at a time. How many of those 60 are looking for a California role? Usually it's pretty small. They post with us once and they say, okay, just tell them to apply through our website from now on. So that's what we encourage students to do, is find their opportunities and bring them to us, and we can look at approving them. So great questions. I appreciate all of this. This is great.
Yeah, so we're gonna wrap it there so we can get to all the speakers, but we're gonna do like some sort of mingling at the end with Ian, so we'll probably go into the hallway, and like if you have any last questions, you can ask him. So thank you so much for coming, and we'll just grab that mic from you. Thank you. And yeah, thank you.
All right, so those are some really good questions from the crowd. I'm going to take it away from there. We have some people from LCS who have already been through co-op. We're also going to ask some questions for them as well. So I'm just going to quickly ask all of you, going from left to right, to introduce yourselves, your name, what you do at LCS. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Declan. I'm in 4th year computer science. I'm a social media coordinator for LCS. I've been part of the LCS for the last 3 years, and I've also been in co-op for the last 3-ish years. I'm entering my 3rd and final co-op next semester.
Hi everyone, I'm Torin. I am the PEP student on this panel. I'm also, because I'm in PEP, I'm kind of in year 3.5, so I'm currently working at IBM as a technical account associate. And this is my first year working on LCS as an events coordinator.
Hi guys, my name is Nish. I'm a fourth year comp sci student with management option. I'm currently on my third work term in winter term, and I'm the VP of Internal Affairs and Admin for LCS.
Hey everyone, I'm Jacob. I'm also a fourth year computer science student here at Laurier, and I'm the co-VP of Development Technology for LCS.
Okay, so we're going to kind of direct the questions to one person just to make the flow easier, but then after that, any of you feel free to jump in, like totally add to that. So first we're going to start with Torin. What is the best way do you think first years can prep for co-op? Or
well,
PEP?
well, kind of a shameless plug for LCS here, but go get involved in extracurriculars and go expand your resume and do stuff you're proud of, do stuff you want to do and be interested, so that when you go into these interviews and all that, you're talking from like passion and being excited to go into that. And yeah, just be more involved.
Great. Do any of you have any other advice?
I agree. Another way to get involved too, beyond just joining a club, because I know a lot of the clubs have had hiring close, is there's a lot of one-off events that happen, like one-day volunteering. For example, this last weekend, Laurier had an open house, and students could volunteer just for that day to give tours of the campus. So that's an example of things. There's lots of opportunities all year round. So if you miss out on hiring for a club, don't worry, there's still other opportunities.
Yeah, that's great. Also, LCS does CP 104 and 164 review sessions, so to get that GPA part of co-op up, you can come to those. Thanks, guys. Here, I'll pass it off to Shakir.
All right, so I'm going to take the next question. This one's for Declan. So what are your opinions on personal job search versus the rank match process?
Yeah, I think they both have pros and cons. I've gotten jobs through both methods. I think the rank match is really useful for the start of your co-op, especially if you don't have very much experience. Because these jobs are being posted on Laurier, you have access to those, and I know some of them might be posted just to Laurier's job board, so you kind of get private access to those. So it's a lot easier to apply to jobs. They're all right there in front of you, but I find that as you move on throughout your co-op and you work towards your third co-op, you might be interested in something very specific that Laurier doesn't have to offer on the job board. So at that point, you may be more interested in a personal job search. So yeah, I think they both definitely have both pros and cons. One thing to note is once you commit to the ranked matchmaking, you can't accept a personal job till afterwards. So that's something to be wary of before committing to rank. So if you want to do personal job search, either do it before or wait till after. And I know a lot of people will want to return to some of their jobs, so that's kind of a thing to note as well. If you enter into primary or enter into ranked match, make sure you know what you're getting into.
Yeah, that was a really good answer. Does anyone want to add on to that?
Yeah, I would just add on for the personal job search that like co-op and PEP is a learning experience. So even if you are focused on the jobs on Navigator, go out and learn how to find certain jobs that you're interested in. Get used to LinkedIn and Indeed and all that stuff, and expand your knowledge and skill set on how to apply for jobs.
All right, here you go, Yana, for the next question.
Great, thanks, guys. So we're out of like the applying process now into interviews. What's your guys' way that you prep for interviews, or like special tips and tricks? And we'll start with Nish for this one.
So from my experience, like interviews, they come in like 3 parts, mainly 2 parts first, like behavior and technical. So if your guys are prepping for behavioral and technical interviews, like behavioral, you can like search up like interview questions. Like they'll always ask you like, tell me about yourself, questions like that. And like they'll ask you like, generic questions like strengths and weaknesses. And if there's like, any scenarios that they'll put you in, and they want to see how you develop as a student. For the technical questions, they'll ask things about based on what the job description has. So if the job description requires Python, they'll ask you your knowledge on Python stuff. So you might want to prep for those. One biggest tip that I've given to everyone is going on Glassdoor. They have reviews on each company and their interviews, and people actually put on the questions that they get asked in interviews. So you can actually look online and find sample questions where for a couple of my friends, they've actually gotten the same questions asked in interviews. So I definitely recommend using Glassdoor.
Hello. Oh. Another thing I found useful is in basically every interview I've had, they'll ask you a question like, tell me about a time you faced a challenge and how you overcame it, or tell you about a time you led a team to success. I find it's really useful to have a few stories in your mind already going into that, a few moments that you're proud of in your career or in school, whether you carried a group project to an A+ grade, or if you worked on a team and you helped them solve a problem to help the company perform better. Having a few stories in mind that you can use to answer a wide variety of questions is something that's really useful. So trying to have a few of those set ready, and you can kind of manipulate your answer a bit to vary how they ask you the question. But yeah, just preparing some memories of yours, so you're not sitting there thinking back to your last job of something you did cool, or something you did in school.
Yeah, and then another thing that I would add to that is when you're interviewing for position, you sort of think to yourself, why would I want to do this position at this particular company as opposed to doing the same position at any other company? And if you can try to incorporate that into your interview, they're going to like it a lot. So you can go on their company's website and find out about the company's values, or maybe give a personal anecdote about why what this company is doing is so important to you. They really appreciate that sort of thing.
Great, thanks guys. Yeah, one tip is just don't get discouraged. Like when I did rank match, I think I had like 8 interviews and I ended up getting a really good job. I'm returning there. So like it's really just a process, and like don't get down on yourself. Here you go.
One other thing. If it's a smaller company, often the person who's interviewing you could end up being your manager or your boss, so they're going to be the ones working with you every day. So you really want to be kind of just personable, and you want to sell yourself as somebody that they'd want to work with every day. And really kind of see you as a person they'd be okay talking to every morning in a meeting, and kind of depending on you. So just try and sell yourself beyond just your skills.
All right, so for the next question, as we have a lot of first and second years here, I'm sure this is an interesting one. So a lot of the time, people are wondering how much experience did each one of you have before you went into your first co-op placement or you made your first application? So we can start with Declan and we can go forwards.
Sure, yeah. I was lucky enough before entering co-op, I actually I completed a full internship this summer between first year and second year at an engineering company, actually the one I'm returning to for my final co-op. So I've kind of came full circle there. But I know most people enter without any experience. Another thing that I was able to do was get a part-time job in CS. There's a place in Waterloo, which you guys could look up, called Code Ninjas, which is tutoring children coding. So I was able to get a bit of experience there. I was only working 1 shift a week, but it was the perfect way to kind of sell myself as knowledgeable in coding. So that was kind of my experience entering into the co-op process.
So I didn't come in with a lot of technical experience, except I had a high school co-op, and it was very technical, but ironically being that I had lots of like social jobs working with people, and that's what got me my PEP job, is I displayed my leadership and my other attributes that were more important than my technical skills, because as you go into co-op, they're knowing you're not going to have that much expertise, right? So they're going to try and build you up, but you want to have those intangibles that I'm a people person, I work well in teams, and I communicate well.
For me, actually, so in first year, I didn't do any clubs at all, so I was kind of lacking on that, and I kind of realized that near the end of first year. So after, like, from high school, I had a part-time job as a lifeguard, and then COVID happened, so obviously my job kind of got fired. So after that, I decided to volunteer and pick up some volunteer positions over the summer. And I thought it would be a great way to like just pick up on some few things, do something, keep myself busy, because obviously everyone in COVID was pretty much sitting at home. I used that to my advantage, actually. So when I had my co-op interview, I told them how I volunteered over the summer. And because funny enough, they actually asked us what we did since COVID happened, because everyone was home doing nothing. So if you guys get the opportunity for like summer, like next time, find a volunteer position, there's plenty of opportunities here in Waterloo.
Yeah, definitely a lot of opportunities in Waterloo, and also at Laurier too. As LCS and as the VP of Dev, I feel like I have to plug some of the things we do, including Project Program, which is like a month-long hackathon event, which we're running right now, and we're running again next semester in collaboration with University of Waterloo. There's also Hawk Hacks, which is something that Nosher runs, And then there's the pods program we run where we put students into development teams for 3 months, and they spend that 3 months working on a cool project together and doing those sorts of things, getting a little bit of interest on your, putting that on your GitHub, being able to show those projects to employers really makes you stand out from the others, especially in coding.
Yeah, those are some really good answers. I feel like a lot of the time people get discouraged when you're in like a CS program, especially like our neighbors at UW. Everyone's cracked, got all these experiences. Honestly, like Torin said, your interviewers know they don't expect too much experience from you, especially on your first placement. So sometimes you just got to be confident in yourself, review what you've done as small as it can be, and you should be fine. It's just confidence from there. So I'll pass the next question on to Yana.
Great, thanks, Shakib. So this is our final question from us, and it's going to be another one for all you guys. So what piece of advice do you wish that you had when you were in co-op that you would give to our first and second years? And this time we'll start with Jacob.
So I would say don't be too hard on yourself and understand that it's a process. So I'll talk you through sort of my journey into working in the tech field, and it was a long one for me. So in high school, I took computer science classes, but that was about it, which meant going into first year, I don't have any relevant work experience. I had little extracurricular, little volunteer, little work experience. So those were all things I had to address, and of course you can't do that all overnight. So you take it step by step. First thing for me was realizing I don't have a lot of work experience. So over the summer, I was applying to jobs. I was doing whatever I could to fill those gaps in the 4 things that Ian talks about getting into co-op.
For me, one biggest advice would be patience. Same thing that Jacob mentioned was like it's going to be a slow process. Like you won't get like if you're expecting Google, FANG, Microsoft, all that stuff. Most likely, it's going to be very difficult. Not saying it's not possible. I had a couple friends in my year right now who are also working at Amazon and Microsoft that are not in the co-op program. So if you definitely put in the work, you can get there. But I do want to tell you that like patience is key. That as you get to your second work term, third work term, it becomes easier. Especially for me, I think I did about 200 applications for 9 interviews in my first work term. And then my second work term, I did around 30 applications for 2 offers. So you can see the big jump from there. Patience is really important. Like obviously you may not have like, the experience when you're applying for your first work term. So when companies might not take you as seriously, like, hey, he doesn't really know much. They might not, be able to work here. But as you work and you find your second work term, it'll be much easier.
So the thing I would say is have a positive attitude towards failing. Like you are going to get rejected. Well, might be one of you that gets the job right away, but you're going to get rejected. That's okay. If you go in and you say, hey, I failed, what can I do better? You're going to do so well. Not just in co-op, but once you're out of co-op and looking for real jobs and just in life, knowing how, hey, I failed, I'm going to go do better, I'm going to improve. And like Ian has all these workshops, right? You can go in and improve your resume. You can go work on your interview skills. There's so much you can do when you fail if you're willing to work on it.
Yeah, as they mentioned, don't be discouraged by the numbers. It's all a learning process, and it's all about growth. That's the reason you have 3 co-op terms. You're not going to become senior software engineer in your first co-op term, but by the time you graduate, the goal is to kind of see that increase and see that improvement over the course of your career. As they mentioned, don't be discouraged by the numbers. When I first applied, I applied to 60 jobs for 2 interviews, and I was immediately discouraged, and I kind of just brought myself down. But then the next year, or after completing 1 co-op term, I applied to 50 jobs and got 11 interviews. So you can just quickly see the improvement. So don't have, just dream expectations for the first co-op, and understand that you have 3. So that's definitely something I'd be wary of. I think somebody asked a question to Ian earlier about are all the jobs like CS jobs? And I think that one misconception is you're going to open up. There's like one day when all the jobs are posted and there's 200 jobs you look at. It's kind of like a big unboxing. And I think there's one thing that people expect is to open up and just see software engineer for every single job. And that's not exactly what CS is. There's a lot more to that than just software engineer and software developer. And that's something to be noticeable of. There's a lot of analyst roles, a lot of cloud systems roles, and there's just a really wide variety. And even though they don't say software engineer, you're still applying these CS skills just in different ways. So that's something to be noticeable about. But yeah.
And I'd like to add on a little bit about getting a job that's maybe not exactly what you expected or what you wanted for your first co-op term, because that's an experience that I personally had. So my first term, I was working with the Laurier Math Lab, basically as a full-time IA, which obviously is pretty far from being a software developer at a big tech firm. So what I did was I just tried to make the most of it. In my job day to day, I tried to think, how can computer science help me so that when I'm going through interviews next time around, I can show them that even though I wasn't a software developer, I was still focusing on growing my skills. So I did things like writing scripts to convert from LaTeX to different markdown languages, and just trying to be as useful as I could as a computer science student so that I could frame it in that light for going forward.
Another example of that, in my first co-op, I was like IT auditing, which is not what I wanted to do, but it was the opportunity that was presented with me. But same thing, you kind of just want to figure out how you can use this to improve yourself for the next term around. So I was able to automate a bunch of the work within the company using VBA, and that immediately put me ahead for my next co-op position, and that was kind of the main thing that I sold myself on as I was doing interviews the next time around. So just trying to use the opportunity that's given to you to boost yourself for the next one. So yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All that advice is really good. Like, pay attention in CP 212, I think it is, because like so many jobs are like at the bottom requirements VBA, and like if that's one of the only things you know, like use it to your advantage. I had a VBA job, and we ended up going into like more in-depth things, and I have more stuff to put on my resume now. Yeah. Pardon? It was a lot of analyst stuff, like data analyst. I was investment risk analyst because I'm BBA, so I wanted to do some finance stuff. What was yours? In auditing? Yeah. IT auditing. A lot of analyst stuff is VBA. Like a ton of the Scotiabank roles, I remember it was like SQL, VBA, so definitely don't take that course for granted. Thank you guys so much. We'll open it up to questions now, so just raise your hand, and if anyone has any questions for our speakers. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just going to say the question out loud so people on the stream can hear it. So the question was, do you have any advice for preparing for the technical portion of interviews?
Yeah, as Nish mentioned before, there's definitely lots of opportunities online to practice. I know most of you probably know LeetCode. That's a great way to practice coding specific questions. But sometimes you may have companies ask you kind of more like brain teasers and riddles, which was something that I was not prepared for. I did a lot of LeetCode stuff, but then they came and asked me stuff that you'd find on the back of a newspaper as a riddle. So just going in with an open mind and not trying to trap yourself in a box thinking one thing. A lot of them are kind of just, they want to see how you think, and they want to see that you're kind of creative with that. So yeah, LeetCode and just keeping an open mind with it.
As Declan said, there's like plenty of resources online like LeetCode, HackerRank that you can do for coding parts. Usually when you get an interview, they'll let you know that it's going to be an hour-long interview. It'll be a coding interview. You'll have like 2 hours or like an hour to do this question. And they'll let you know there's like 2 questions that you'll have like senior software engineers there during your interview. Another part of the interview is technical questions, where they'll just verbally ask you anything about, let's say, Java. Like most commonly, like for my positions, I've been working as a software engineer, so I've had plenty of jobs using Java. So they just ask me, hey, what are the 4 pillars of object-oriented programming? What is encapsulation? Stuff like that you'll learn in 213. And they'll just ask me things like, can you explain the definition of a linked list, or how does it work? And so you just verbally give the answer from there rather than code.
Testing? Okay. Kind of goes without saying, but look at the job posting and don't ignore the tools that are on there. I've had people just say, I'm just going to wing it. Like, go in, even if you're so confident, just prep a little bit, right? You can always do better.
And the last thing that I want to add to that is there will be times where you're asked a technical question where you just don't know the answer. Maybe it's a yes or no, or maybe it's describe this. And the best course of action there is tell them what you do know, if anything. Don't make stuff up, and then tell them why you're interested in learning what that is in the future.
Yeah, that's great advice. Anyone else have a question? Maybe related to any of the jobs they talked about, or just the co-op process in general? Do we have any in the chat? I don't know if anyone is on the Twitch. No, okay. Yeah.
Is there any like specific interview you
Yeah, so I'll just repeat it for the stream. Was there any interview that kind of changed your perspective or made you change what you were doing in your process for interviews?
I think my first ever interview, I think it really scared me. My first ever interview was for I don't know if you guys seen it in the mall, a Calendar Club of Canada, a very small company, out in Paris, Ontario. And it was pretty much me being an IT administrator for like Microsoft documentation, like writing up Word documents. And it scared me. Like I literally was in the interview. They were asking me like, hey, are you comfortable with Excel documentation? And I'm telling them like, oh, will I be doing any coding? They're like, oh, no, we don't need you. We just need you at the front desk. And I'm like, and it really scared me from there. And then I looked at my resume too. I was like, hey, what's going on? Like, why am I not getting the, like those big tech roles that I really wanted? So I would recommend like, looking at the job description. If they require Python, I would recommend getting a Python project on your resume, especially, make something up with Python and then put it on your resume. And then when it goes through the parser, when you apply, you'll be more likely to get an interview from there. And then when you do get an interview, you can talk about why you're interested in this job and how you use Python and to build your project and how you're going to be a great role for the company.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it's really important to kind of sell yourself as somebody they'd want to work with. One of the first interviews I had, I mentioned I liked the Raptors. And then the lady who would have been my manager, she mentioned that she also liked the Toronto Raptors. And then next thing you know, we spent the next 5 to 10 minutes talking about going to the Raptors parade when they won the championship and stuff like that. And that was about half the interview, just kind of having a regular conversation as if we were just, sitting and having coffee, and ended up getting the offer for that job. So I think that really kind of woke me up for focusing on selling yourself as somebody they'd want to work with, and don't just sit there as a robot. Having that experience and having those technical skills is definitely important, but you could be a genius with algorithms, but if you can't sit there and have a general conversation with them, they aren't going to want to work with you. So that really woke me up for making sure that I'm somebody that they'd want to work with. So, just having a smile on your face and being, light about it and throw a joke in there or something is definitely something that I've really carried on since that interview.
I think what helped me was, instead of just seeing this person's just strictly questioning me, is that it's a two-way conversation. Go in and ask questions because you're going to be working with them. You want to know what the job's like. And one of the biggest things I asked was, what do you like about working here? And I remember the one interview, they gave me some answers, but I honestly can't remember any of it because they didn't seem that interested. And then the job I'm in now, I asked, and they just went on and on about the team, and they seemed genuinely interested about their position. They loved their work. And then it turned into a great conversation, and then I ended up getting that job. So go in thinking, like, I'm going to ask questions. This is my job search. Like, it's a two-way street.
Yeah, those are some really good answers. I like how you guys bring up how it's not a robotic thing. It's like a conversation you're having with someone. You really want to open up to them, get comfortable. So I just have one question from the stream. So someone asks, are the technical questions more like CP 104, 164, data structures and algorithms, or is it more like project-based and experience questions? And I guess to add on, how much of the interview would you say is technical and how much is more like behavioral?
Yeah, I'd say that just varies so much depending on the job, depending on the employer. There's really no set answer on that. One could just be entirely algorithm questions, and the other could be a coding job, but they still only ask you behavioral stuff. So there's really no set answer on that. I just say be prepared for both, and just having an open mind. I know one thing, a lot of companies kind of reuse some questions. So one of my interviews, I had a friend who had interviewed the previous co-op, and he mentioned kind of one of like the riddle questions that they asked him. So I prepared for that, and then they ended up asking me the same thing. So yeah, just kind of doing your research and just being prepared for anything.
I'll just expand on Declan here. Yeah, it does vary. Some application companies, they just do straight up. They'll do an coding interview. They'll say, hey, the next interview you'll have will be 1 hour long, just coding, and you'll sit down with like 2 engineers, and then they will ask you a coding problem, and they'll see it live, where you'll just code there. In other cases, you'll have like an HR person and a manager that you'll be working with, and they'll just verbally ask you some technical questions and see and test your knowledge based on what the job description mentioned, and if you're really eligible for the job. Other than that, like, there hasn't been like anything too crazy that I've seen, but do be prepared. And if you have any questions, feel free to send an email to like the HR person that you have an interview from to ask them to ensure that you know whether it's a coding interview or not.
And not really part of the actual, it is part of the interview, but a lot of places when they want to see your technical know-how, they'll send a hacker rank. So go get used to hacker rank. It's a great way. It's like an exam, and it's going to ask you these computer science questions and ask you to solve it in a certain amount of time and under a certain complexity. And it's just great. It's a great way to practice, let alone get used to what they might require on the job and what they're going to ask you.
Yeah, that's definitely something I noticed at a lot of companies. They'll send you kind of like pre-interview quizzes. I know at RBC, I think, they send you like these weird little like memory games, and you sit there for like 30 minutes rotating blocks and stuff like that. And at first it seems kind of random, but it is pretty common for a lot of jobs. They'll send you stuff prior to actually getting a one-on-one interview, which I'm not personally a fan of. I'd much rather talk to somebody, but you can see why they do it. And at least it kind of relieves some of the pressure that comes with technical interviews. You're sitting there by yourself rather than having to do it while somebody stares at you. So that's definitely something to keep an eye out for. If you're applying to jobs, you'll seem to get a lot of emails saying, hey, complete this online assessment. So something that I wasn't aware of until I joined co-op.
Yeah, and one last thing for anyone in data science, if you apply to data science roles, you'll get take-home assignments with data sets to work on, and they'll give you like a little challenge to do. So just be aware of that as well.
All right, so just to wrap up, are there any other questions from the crowd? Yeah. Okay, so the question was, how do you network yourself, and like what your experiences are on LinkedIn and other social platforms?
So like the companies that I want to work at, like I look at companies where I would like to work at and see myself in the future. I go on LinkedIn and search up software engineer at that company or specific roles that I would love to see myself doing in the future. And I would just connect with them, add a note, hey, love to see that you're a software engineer at company A. Would love to be there at one time. Any tips and advice on that? Send them a LinkedIn message. And, if they don't reply, you can find another person too. But I love to just shoot messages to as many people as I can, connect with them, have a chat, and then hopefully they can provide any tips and hopefully referrals. I've actually got a few referrals from people that I've never met in person, and they've just said, hey, you know what, I'll give you a referral to this company. And I was like, oh, that's great. Another thing is when I apply to a company and I really want it, I just go on LinkedIn and I search up for the HR or talent partner acquisition team, and I message a few people from HR. And I'm like, hey, I applied to this job position, and I send them the link of the job description, send them my resume, and they'll be like, hey, I'm really excited to join, apply here and work here. So could you give me a referral? And the reason I do this is because when they're going through 200 applications and then they're going through each name and then they see my name, they're like, hey, where do I remember this person from? And they'll remember that like I messaged them on LinkedIn, and so I might have a higher chance of, getting in.
Yeah, I'd say. Hello. Yeah, I'd say LinkedIn is definitely like the most popular platform for networking, but it definitely doesn't stop there. And I like to say there's networks everywhere. For example, I got a job interview just from my neighbor mentioning that I'm in computer science. He was able to get me a job interview. I know some of my friends who are in fourth year computer science who have completed co-ops have been able to give referrals for other friends. So just having those connections with everybody, whether it be, my friend works at IBM, he was able to put in a good word, or your neighbor, or LinkedIn. There's just networks everywhere. Just being nice to people and really just kind of being somebody that you'd want to work with, it really goes a long way. So messaging recruiters on LinkedIn isn't your only option. I'd say try and look for opportunities everywhere, whether that be your neighbor, family member, friend, LinkedIn, all over the place. So really kind of just spread your network at as much places as you can.
And one last thing, so not even LinkedIn, but anywhere else, as Declan mentioned, neighbors or anything too. Also check online for like tech fairs, career fairs, and also they happen. Career fairs all usually happen around February, so definitely check out those. Especially Community Tech, they're big on finding Waterloo startups, and they do career fairs for tech companies where you can possibly get a job. And also, if you want shameless LCS plug here, Meet the Professionals, where we're going to bring out people from across the industry. For example, if you guys don't know, last year we had people from Meta, Google, IBM that came out, and you can network with them and hopefully get a referral and connect with them on any career advice. So December 1st, Meet the Professionals. Do come out.
And I'd say you're already at the right spot for networking. You have lots of people with similar interests here. We've got lots of people at LCS with past co-ops. Come talk to us. Come say hi. We'll tell you. We'll give you advice. We'll maybe like there might be some people who say, "Hey, I found this job posting. You should apply to that too." Just get out there and talk to people.
And one last thing, we've been talking about networking a lot, but something specific to the co-op program. Since you're doing 3 co-op rounds, it's very likely and very possible that you could apply to a job one term, do an interview, get rejected, and then apply again. And if that's the case, then it'd be a good idea to talk with the interviewer, especially if you really like the job opportunity. Maybe network with the interviewer. That way next year when they see you again, they remember you. I had a similar situation to this where I was ranked second by an employer. I came back the next time around and I basically said, "Hey, you ranked me second last time. Here's what I've learned since then. Hopefully that's enough to get me to first."
Yeah, that's great advice. We had one question from the Twitch chat that was something along the lines of, what are like the first tasks or projects you worked on and then used in your application? So do any of you have like an experience like that?
Like work tasks or school?
Just like things you used on your resume, like side projects, stuff like that.
Yeah, another plug to LCS. In first year, I worked as a front-end developer to help one of the LCS projects, and that was kind of one of my main selling points on my resume. Even though it was only a few weeks long project, it was kind of a little thing for the website, but having front-end developer at Laurier Computer Science on your resume immediately puts you steps ahead. So just looking for projects like that, work with your friends, do open source work. There's opportunities everywhere, hackathons, your own personal work, just anything you can find to kind of put yourself ahead.
Yeah, Hawk Hacks. That's coming up soon. I think next semester. That's like an affiliate club to LCS, so definitely keep an eye out for that.
I'm just going to give advice for this one. Don't use your school projects, but if you did something cool with a school project, turn it into something else. Do something cool with it and expand on it.
I'd say the only class that's worth using on your resume is software engineering, depending on your professor. But for most people, if you take software engineering CP 317, the entire class is basically one big group project. So that's the one where I'd say it's worth putting on your resume. For me, we worked with a group of 16 kids and created a full social media platform. So that's something where it's worth. But yeah, for the most part, school, because every kid in this room is taking the same classes. So you got to find something to really put yourself ahead and make yourself unique.
Another thing I recommend is like if you're trying to like learn something online, like using Coursera or Udemy that you're paying online for, look for courses that also offer projects that you can build on. So as you're learning of the course, they'll give you a project to work on, and feel free to put those projects on your resume. I think I have like 3 projects from Coursera that I have on my resume that have been really helping me out to find jobs in the industry.
Build a website. Build your own personal website. That's probably the main one. Having yourname.com is kind of one of the biggest sellers. It's pretty easy, if you just do it with React or even just HTML and CSS, anything, just to say you have your own website immediately puts you ahead, especially since you don't really do any web development in the Laurier CS curriculum. That's something you can definitely do.
I definitely wouldn't, like, if you're in BBA CS, you're applying in second year, don't only put software engineering. You haven't even took software engineering yet. So like, if you don't have experiences, you have to milk everything you have and like have those projects. But obviously, if you're looking for a more technical role, you're going to need like more intricate projects, but don't take that just at face value. Like, you definitely should milk everything you have on your resume, and you'll learn all about that in co-op fundamentals. I think there's a hand up back there. Okay, so the question was, if you're making a website for your resume or as a project, should you use like a website builder or should you code it out yourself?
I'd say code it out yourself if that's kind of the role you want that you're applying to. Being able to say you're able to make those, especially if you're applying to a job that's web developer, being able to say you built a website yourself is definitely a bit more of a selling point than saying you're able to use a template. So it really depends on what you want to go into.
Yeah, I totally agree. So if you want to be something like a front-end developer, then when you develop that website for yourself, that's a great opportunity to show off your front-end skills. However, if you want to do something totally unrelated, if you want to be maybe a cloud engineer or you want to work in IT, then that might not be the best use of your time to code a website from scratch, because those aren't necessarily skills you'll be using in the job.
Okay, great. I think we're going to stop questions here. and the way that like the rest of the event is going to go. So if you don't have any other questions, just feel free to head out because this room is so small. If you're like done, respectfully leave. Thank you for coming. But like not yet. But just because it's so crowded, you guys know. Ian will stick around for a bit. We're going to put him kind of in the hallway because again, it is a small room. But if you have so maybe head over there now to skip the chaos. Thank you so much for coming. And if you have questions for the 4 speakers, feel free to come to the front. Thank you guys so much.